This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay. Good morning, Rabbi Sai. So we continue in our series on the Tzava of Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid. Let's focus today on maybe the most interesting part of the whole subject. And the particular admonition that we're focusing on is that one should not marry a woman with the same name as his mother, and a woman should not marry a man with the same name as her father. What could possibly be the reason for that? Certainly it would seem that these are gezeros, and they don't seem to have logical reasons or svaros behind them, but nevertheless, lefi madrigasenu, what could possibly be a reason for this admonition? So the first reason we're going to focus on is what's brought down in number 42. Number 42. Shailas Teshuvos Zichron Yehuda of Greenwald, Chelik Beis Siman Kuf Mem Vav. And he says something, a very logical reason. You know what's going to happen if Shprinza marries somebody by the name of Yankel? And the problem is that, let's say Shprinza's father is Yankel. So Shprinza is going to say to Yankel, Yankel! Every day I tell you to take out the garbage, you never take out the garbage. And her father is sitting right there. It's a bizayin to the father. How is she going to be able to scream at her husband? But her father has the same name. It's going to be an embarrassment to him.
Does she call him Abba?
You're now to say, she does, but she's screaming at her husband. She doesn't call her husband Abba. She calls her husband Yankel. If her husband has the same name as her father, it's going to be a problem of saying her father's name in her presence. Or, let's say, he wants to yell at Yentel. The problem is his mother's name is Yentel. So he's going to yell at Yentel, Yentel, I told you the chicken has to be medium to well done. How many times do I have to ask you to get the chicken right? And meanwhile, Yentel, the mother, is sitting right there. And she's going to, mein Zin, what's he saying to me? So it's going to be a lack of kibbut avayim.
So the same thing apply if Chas v'Chil, the Kala is the Yisoma.
Oh, so then if the mother isn't alive, or the father's not alive, then according to this reason, it shouldn't be a problem.
Right.
But, okay, so we'll take a look in Shailas Teshuvos Zichron Yehuda, number 42. He says like this. In the middle of the piece, V'aniba anyi, yesh li litain tam, I could give a reason al pi pshutai, simply. Hagam de bevadai ruach Hashem diber bam, b'kedoshei Hashem zechus yagan aleinu. Certainly the Spirit of God spoke in the holy of Hashem, meaning in Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid. B'chol zeh yishem al pi pshutai, klape de kaimelam b'shalnach yardei hachas kibbut avayim, siman reish mem, de aser likres la avav v'imay bishmam, you're not to call your father and mother their name, v'gam shaloi b'fanav, and even not in their presence, you're not to use their name, imhu shem ploi, if it's an unusual name, umayatem shem hachasin kashem hachoisein, if the husband's name is the same as the father-in-law, iveras habas, imkara labala b'shma b'fnei aviyah, the daughter is going to be violating kibbut avayim, she calls the name of the husband in front of her father, v'chein, uk'maykein, im shma shal akala kashem chamoisa, if the name of the wife is the name as the mother-in-law, Iverhu, Kamaykin Shikarla Isha Bishmaj B'Shem Imai. Now then it would come out, that's only if they have the exact same name. But if one of them is Yenta Sprinza and the other one is Yenta whatever, Frado, then it's okay because it's not the same name, it's a different name. That's the first suggestion of why Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid said not to marry someone with the same name.
If
Yeah.
first names are the same, but the middle names are different, and they rarely use the middle names, the same problem would come
No,
up.
it depends. If it's
if that's what they normally use.
again, if there's another middle name that's used, we're talking about if it's used, then it would be okay. However, Avad Yosef flatly rejects this reason. And he says that obviously this reason is not correct. And the proof that this reason is not correct is based on Minhag Sfarad. Because Minhag Sfarad is, what do you name the children? You name the children the names of the living parents. So if you're worried that you can't marry a woman with the name of your mother because you're going to end up saying your mother's name, so what are the Sfardim doing? Naming, if the mother's name is Yenta, they name the little girl Yentala. How do they name the little girl Yentala? What are they going to do when the mother's in the house? They want to call Yentala and the mama's over there. Or they name the boy the name of the living grandfather.
Well, the siblings will be calling the kid Yentala.
Yeah.
They'll be using the mother's name.
No, the grandmother's name.
Yeah, the grandmother, yeah.
Well, okay, that's a question. That might not be a problem. But for the son, the child, right? The child to use. So apparently the parents are moichal. They're moichal on their kavod. They're moichal that they allow their children to give their children their names even while they're still alive. So too, a mother-in-law will be moichal if you marry a girl with the same name as her. So maybe you'll ask on Rabbi Vadia, a mother will be moichal if you call her grandchild after her, but she ain't going to be moichal if her daughter-in-law has her name. You know, there's mechila and there's mechila. What's good for an anikel is not necessarily good for the shnir, you know. But anyway, that's Rabbi Vadia's question on the Zichron and Yehuda. He says, "Ube'emes shehaminag pashut etzleinu likroi es habanim b'shem avi habal v'ha'isha af kishehem b'chayim." The minhag is to call the names of the children in the name of the father of the husband and wife, af kishem b'chayim, even when they're alive. Ves habanois, and the names of the daughter, b'shem imaisem, and the names of their mother. V'im hayek peda b'davar zeh, if there would be a hakpada, shaloi lezdaveg, not to marry kishem hachos and kishem chamav, b'shem hakalah kishem chamoisa, koshekain shahayu lanu lahakbid lecharchila shaloi likroi lebanim levanis b'shem avos hamois. If there would be such a hakpada, then we should never allow someone to name their children after the living parents. Alma, says Rabbi Vadia, we're not makbid. Why not? The reason why Sfardim are not makbid is because they are careful never to call their daughter Yentala when the mother Yentala is around, and never to call the kid whatever Yitzchak if the father Yitzchak is alive. So if that's the case, you could do the same thing with your wife. You'll be careful not to call her by name if the mother is around. So that's the first reason offered by the Zichron Yehuda that Rabbi Vadia objects to. Another possible reason, an amazing reason. It's a very interesting phenomenon. If I were to ask you, who gets first dibs on names? The first name. When someone has a child, who gets the right to name the child? Does it go to the father or does it go to the mother? Usually the mother. So I'm here to tell you, it's absolutely wrong. The halacha is the father gets the first name. Now I'm not telling you to follow the halacha if you know it's good for you over here. But the halacha is the father gets the first name. The practice in the world is the mother gets the first name. So how does that make sense? The answer, the halacha is the father gets the first name. However, if you want to return to your home safely and have a place to sleep, then the mother gets the first name. Now you say, where does it say the halacha is that the father gets the first name? The answer is it's more than a halacha. It's a pasuk in Chumash. Where is it a pasuk in Chumash? It says that Yehuda got married and he had vayikra shemoi vatahar oid vatelen beid, vatikra shemoi oinan, vatahar oid vatikra shemoi shela, v'hu b'chsiv belidata oisa. So listen carefully. By the first child it says Yehuda named her. By the second child it said she named her. By the third child it said she named her. And then it says, by the way, Yehuda was in Ksiv. So Tosfos asks, who cares? I don't care where Yehuda was. Maybe Yehuda's in Kentucky. Says Tosfos, the Torah is teaching you, if Yehuda got named 1 and she got named 2, then why does the Torah say that she got named 3? He should get named 3, right? The answer is that's what the Torah says. He was in Bechziv. He's out of town. Why is the Torah saying he's out of town? To explain why she got the third name. So from here we see Tosfos says that the boy gets first dibs. It's a pasuk in Chumash.
Why was he out of town when he knew his wife was due?
Too much pressure. It's too much pressure.
Didn't Leah call and name all the names?
Yeah, so Lamaisa, the Imahis, it seems like she got all of them.
Yeah.
So like I said, there's...
Yaakov was Ishtan, Yoshe followed him, he was never around.
Many of them it says, right, Ata Yilavani Ishi. Here, look in Tosfos. Tosfos says in number 46, Vatikra Shemai Shela V'haya B'chziv. Perush, Al Kain Kara Shemai Shela. This is, okay, if you look in the second shot of Tosfos, Umipi Moiri Zal, the second line Shamati, Ki Kach Hayim in Hagam, Hu Hayakarishim Livnai Rishain. The man would call the first name. Vihi Karashem Livnai Sheni. And she would call the second name. Vim Kain Min Adin Hayalai Yehuda Likor Shem Lashlishi. Really, Yehuda should get the third name. Vihi Karalai Shem, but she called it. Kidachsiva Tikra. Lekach Hutzrach Loimar Shahaya Yehuda Bechziv Belita Ta'isai V'lahai B'laisa Maimud Likor Lashem. He couldn't make it to the Kiddush. That's why. It's a place, yeah. That's why, okay. So now the question is he allowed to give up the right to name first? Could he be Michael and say, look, for the sake of Shalom Bayis, since I want to have a place to sleep at night, I'm going to let her name the first kid. Especially if I want to have a second kid. I'll give her the first name. Is he allowed to? The answer is it is asur to be Michael. What is the punishment if somebody is Michael? Chayv Misa. What? I thought she gets the first name, and here we're learning he gets the first name, and now he gets first name, he's not to be Michael, and if he's Michael, where does it say that it's Chayv Misa? It's a pasuk in Chumash. Where do we find it? Aaron married a woman by the name of Elisheva. Who's Elisheva's father? Aminadav. Good. Aminadav. What was the name of Aaron's first kid? Nadav. What was the name of the second kid? Avihu. Where does Nadav come from? Aaron let Elisheva name after her father Aminadav, Nadav. Then Aaron said, I'll get the second name, and Avihu, he's my father. And they both died. Why they both died? Says the Ikrei Hadat, they both died because Aaron wasn't Mechabed his father, and he let her call the first name.
Yeah, but the kid died. Why did they die? Not Aaron. Yeah, Aaron's one of the
Says the Ikrei Hadat, Rav Daniel Turney, one of the Achronim, B'makom shenagu likrei haben rishon anola adam shem av ve'ishta roitza shikra shem avia ve'ish mishum shalom habayis haya merutza hela harav de'ein biyad ha'adam l'shanois. You cannot change it. She'agia mizem miyot kavod la'aviv. It's going to be, you want to tell him to be quiet? It's going to be a miyot kavod to the father. V'imhi misakeshes, if she's stubborn, yikru'uhu b'beish moisem, call her two names. Use two names. Kedach kamnei adam shekaiflam shemes b'neim uv'naisem umagam sha'amru b'shem harav Hachasid shemi shaban of mesim. There's a klal, somebody who nebuch, if a child dies, you call the next child two names. The one name, and the second name should be name of the child who passed away. Do not dare call your first child the name of your father-in-law. And he says, Look what happened to Nadav Avihu. Sheshama mi piara priya arz v'shem Chazal. Did Nadav nikra al shem Chamiv? Nadav is the name of the father, so Yeshua is Bas Aminadav. V'avihu al shem Aviv, Avihu. V'nenash, because he let his wife call the kid after the father-in-law before he called after his own father. So maybe, so comes Rav Reuven Margolius and he says, U'ga'inastik asfara. Says Rav Reuven Margolius, now I understand, number 48, okay? Now I understand why you shouldn't marry a man or you shouldn't marry a girl with the same name as your mother. Why? Because if you marry a girl with the same name as your mother, then what's going to happen? Then you won't be able to name your child after the mother. And it's going to be a lack of kibbud avim. You see how important it is to name after a parent, deceased parent. But if your wife has the name of the deceased parent, you're not going to be able to name your kids after your mother. And likewise, she is not going to be able to name her boys after her father because her husband has the father's name.
Isn't this also a riot that you can name your child after a living person with Amram? Amram is still alive now. They named the
Okay.
kid, right?
Yeah.
He said he should have named the child after Amram.
After Avihu, after Aaron's father.
Amram.
Yeah. We don't know for sure. Okay. Okay. But the point is, it says Rabbi Golas, since it's so important to name after a parent, if you marry someone with the same name as your parent, you're eliminating your ability to name after your parent. So that's the reason offered by Rav Reuven Magolias. Rav Yosef Shal Halevi Natanzan offers another important reason, and he says, this is number 49, another svara, why Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid did not want somebody to marry a woman with the same name as her mother, or a woman marry someone with the same name as her father. Because the guy is going to say, Sprinzela! He's going to call Sprinzela. And what happened if instead of Sprinzela coming, the mother comes? And then, Baboiker, you realized it wasn't your wife. It's going to be big problems. If your wife and your mother have the same name, you're going to run into trouble. It's going to be a takala. Okay? You got it? Let's leave it like that.
You can't tell the difference. When they come, you have bigger problems than that.
That's going to be big problems.
I know they didn't have electric lights.
If your wife and parent has the same name, you could run into trouble. What the trouble is, v'hamei v'nyaven. And if you don't understand, then deal with it. So that's what Rabbi Yosef Shal Halevi Natan says. It's not recommended that the wife and the parent have the same name. Okay? Now, Rabbi Vadia ultimately says none of the above. None of these are the real reason for Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid. What's the real reason for Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid? Let's go back for a moment. And that is, would any of these svaras apply to two brothers marrying two sisters? Well, you could say they don't have the same name. You could say it could come to a takala if, let's say, they look the same or they're similar. It could come to a takala possibly, but here there's what about when Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid said an uncle should not marry a niece? Do any of these reasons apply? No. Because this is your only wife, she doesn't have the same name, why wouldn't an uncle be allowed to marry a niece? So there's another reason offered, if you look at number 44. The reason offered here is a Shas Tshuvas Even HaRoisha. The Even HaRoisha says, there's a pashut reason why Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid said not to marry your niece. Because Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid was a lot smarter than you think. And Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid knew something that science understands today. And that is that it's not good for the DNA for two people who are closely related to marry. That's why Ashkenazic Jewry has so many inherited diseases, because 1,000 years ago there were only 10,000 Ashkenazim, and they just marry, they could get knipped and gebindert, back and forth, cousins marrying cousins marrying cousins marrying cousins, and you have all these mutations, and you have all kinds of genetic diseases because of inbreeding, right?
I saw a study, the pharaohs in Mitzrayim had that exact problem. They married sisters and brothers. They had inbreeding, and the bad genes just got worse and worse and worse, and many of them died young because of that.
Mm-hmm. So maybe that's the reason why Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid said not to marry your niece. We think it's Kabbalistic reason. We think it's a metaphysical reason. No, it's a scientific reason. He knew that it's dangerous to marry your niece.
Why dafka an uncle and a niece? Any close relative would have the same problem.
No, because other close relatives, you're not allowed. The Torah says you're not allowed to. It's the only. Now, so you'll ask, so why does the Mishnah say?
First cousins.
What? So first cousins, taka, is not as dangerous as an uncle and a niece. Look, even today, it's common to marry second cousins. It's common. I mean, I have relatives that married second cousins. By some Hasidim, they marry first cousins even. But second cousins, even Rabbanim will tell you it's okay. Even scientifically, it's okay to marry a second cousin. But an uncle and a niece is someone. But the question is, but the Mishnah says it's a mitzvah. So How would Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid know better than the Mishnah? The Mishnah has given me Sinai. Hashem knew it was dangerous, and yet Hashem conveyed that it's a mitzvah to marry your niece. Why would Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid say not like that? So we're coming back now to the Sfar of the Divrei Chaim, and that is, if you do it l'shem mitzvah, if you do it l'shem shamayim, the kavanah l'shem shamayim will protect you of the potential danger involved. However, Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid realized that nowadays nobody's getting married l'shem shamayim. They're doing it lahana. Therefore, you're sort of subject to the potential DNA danger of inbreeding and possible mutations in the offspring. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid warned against something that the Gemara didn't have to warn against, because in the times of the Gemara there was more of a l'shem shamayim involved as opposed to today. Rabbi Vadia rejects this reason as well. Rabbi Vadia says it's not mistaber that Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid said that an uncle should not marry his niece for genetic reasons, because everything else he said was like supernatural. He said, don't eat a chicken, don't shecht a chicken in the month of Shvat. Don't buy a house on virgin land. All of these things seem to be supernatural. It would seem then that the reason why you shouldn't marry your niece is also some kind of supernatural reason, which the Rabbi Vadia says is, you know what the supernatural reason for all of these things is? Ayin hara. Ayin hara. What's the ayin hara? If your mother's name is Shprinza and you marry a woman Shprinza, then what are people going to be talking about all day? I can't believe I went to a chasana, the kala Shprinza, the mother Shprinza. I mean, how many Shprinzas are there? Everyone Shprinza. It attracts people's attention. It's a subject of conversation. You're going to be in everybody's mouth. There are too many Shprinzas here. If two brothers marry two sisters, scandal over here. Why do you think the second brother married the second sister? Because by the first Sheva brachas, people are going to be talking about it. I just went to a chasana. I thought I just went to that at the same chasana 2 months ago. I mean, I could have, it was the father and mother. I don't understand. And 2 weeks later, they're walking someone else down to the chuppah. Oh, it's a brother. It becomes too much of a topic of conversation.
You don't have to break in new in-laws.
What?
You don't have to break in new in-laws. It's an advantage.
There you go. So says Rabbi Vadia, right, that says Rabbi Vadia, the reason for all the svaras of Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid is basically ayin hara. Take a look at number 45. Val kapanim mistaber Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid loy asi ala mitam nezek tivi kedivrei chachmei harayfim. Probably Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid did not mean for scientific reasons. V'yagid olav re'ai. Let the other cases sort of reflect on this case. Shekulam skulos. All of them are supernatural. V'chshash ayin haraninu, like the Chida says. Now, with this idea that the reasoning of Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid is ayin hara, the Chida uses this to sort of answer some of the questions on Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid. And that is, one of the questions that we asked in Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid was from Brachas Daf Mem Daled, that 80 kohanim married 80 sisters, which shows that a brother is allowed to marry a sister. So the Chida says, take a look at number 41 for a minute. So that was, one answer that we gave. There are different gersais, whether they were hung or they weren't hung. It's not clear that that's what their end was. Yeah, you're right. That's one of the terutzim we gave to that Gemara. But it's not clear that that's what their end was. So that's the question we're dealing with. What about the 80 kohanim who married 80 sisters? So if you look in the Chida wrote a commentary to Sefer Chasidim called Bris Olam. And the Chida says, number 41 on the fourth line, V'li hadal nira, to me the impoverished one it would seem, the keshem the shinoi hamakoimim b'shinoi hazmanim garim l'kam devarim. We know that over the course of time, over the course of history, things change, like refuahs, right? You look in the seventh parak of Gittin, it says, if you have a headache, take a goose head, cook it up, take a rat's tail, mix it together, and you have a nice potion, that's going to cure you. And, nowadays you give that to somebody, they would drop dead just from the medicine. So what happened? Here the Gemara says this is a medication and it doesn't seem to work. So we say, Nishtana HaTeva. Nature changed. What worked back then does not necessarily work today. Well, says the Chida, it could be that when it comes to ayin hara, you know why Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid said 80 brothers should marry 80 sisters? Because of ayin hara. In the times of the Gemara they did it. That's because in times of the Gemara, ayin hara was not so prevalent. The strength of ayin hara was not so prevalent. But nowadays, ayin hara is out of control, and therefore today we have to be much more concerned. Says the Chida, just like we know refuahs and the shas changed, that nowadays they don't help. Gam le'inyan zugay shaya sakana v'shuv leka kreda kal gam le'inyan elu nishtana de gavra sitra achra me'ayin hara bezeh duk v'herach. Then the Chida says, back in the times of the Gemara, it was common for two brothers to marry two sisters. Therefore, it didn't attract so much attention, so it wasn't an ayin hara. Nowadays, it's not really common for an uncle to marry a niece or two brothers to marry two sisters. So if you do it, it's a big scandal, so it's an ayin hara. The Rebbe Vadia questions the Chida's first answer. Again, the first answer is that today, the sitra achra, the tumah of ayin hara, the strength of ayin hara, the concern of ayin hara is much stronger. So if you look at number 52...
Is that why they don't do Yibum today also?
Right, so Yibum, the Gemara says that we don't do it because people don't do it l'shem shamayim, so now you're in danger of eishas ach. But the Chida, Rebbe Vadia, in number 52, says that he finds it difficult to believe that ayin hara is worse today than back in the day. He says it would seem logical that it's just the opposite. Normally we say all of these spooky things were much more prevalent in the times of Chazal than they are today. For example, Shadim. Are there more Shadim today or less Shadim today? Most people never saw Shadim. Now I'll tell you the truth, I've definitely seen Shadim. I used to walk in Queens at night when I lived here. I used to go for a walk at night. I definitely saw people that were Shadim, no question at all. Some very shady business going on. But still... but in general, I don't think most people see Shadim. Why? The Rambam says Shadim are not prevalent anymore. Back in the day, they're very prevalent. It used to be there were dibbiks, or talking fish. My fish never spoke to me. I never had a conversation with herring, or any... I went to a bris this morning, they had lox. The lox did not have anything to say. But back...
I eat lox that talks back to me all the time.
Yeah.
So you didn't believe that story?
That story? The talking fish? I don't know. I wasn't there. I can't comment, right? So says the Chida, says the Rebbe Vadia, number 52, that it's Yadua, many types of Ruach Ra are not as prevalent today. Like we say, Tosfos and Chulin says, by the Ruach Ra of Shifta, and the Mordechai says such a thing. And by the way, there's an interesting Yam Shel Shloimeh. There's a halacha that's the Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring it down, and the Gemara doesn't bring it down, but the Mishnah Berurah brings it, and the Kitzur brings it, that one should not walk Dalet Amos before they wash Negel Vaser, because of the Ruach Ra in one's hands. And the question is, many people are not Zahir in it. Even Yireim Ushleimim, even, people are very medactic b'mitzvahs, not all of them have Negel Vaser right by their bed. So what's the leniency to go to the sink? One of the leniencies is that we say the Ruach Ra that are on the Yadayim, it's weaker than it used to be. It's not as strong as it used to be. Actually, I spoke yesterday by Shal Shudis. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach writes that he has a tradition from the Ziknei Yerushalayim that in 1749, when Avraham ben Avraham, the Ger Tzedek of Vilna, when he was burnt al Kiddush Hashem in Vilna, the Vilna Gaon said at that moment, a fire emanated from the Ma'aras HaMachpelah, which consumed the Sitra Achra, which is the evil spirit that rests on the hands in the morning, and now Netilas Yadayim in the morning is a little bit more lenient, that you could go Dalet Amos to wash it. That's what the tradition is. Again, the Mishnah Berurah still does bring it down. Point being, in general, many of these things we say are weaker. So says Rebbe Vadia, it's not really mistaber to say that the strength of ayin hara is worse today than it was back in the day.
Yet you would think that the emunah then and the Limud Torah was much stronger than it is today. So today we've had a degradation of the level of Amunah, Talmud Torah, whatever. You would think that those powers would be stronger.
So actually, Ravaji says a Kabbalistic svara. Good. He says, we know the Sitra Achra is yoinek from Kedusha. It nourishes from Kedusha. So back in the day when the Kedusha was stronger, it's zel zel, right? You don't have witchcraft anymore. You don't have kishuf. You don't have black magic. You don't have the dark side, because God has to keep an even playing field. So when the Kedusha was on a very high level, you had dibuks and tumah and shadim and Sitra Achra. But nowadays, where the Kedusha is weaker, like you pointed out, it's mistaber that ayin hara is weaker as well. But what we've examined today is some of the logics, perhaps, of why Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid in fact said it's not a good idea to marry someone with the same name as your mother. Either you're going to end up calling her your mother's name, which is not proper, Ravaji didn't like that, or you're going to lose the ability to name after a parent, or like we said, it could lead to something inappropriate, or there's some type of ayin hara that's going to attract too much attention. Mirz Hashem, next time, we're going to discuss the machlokes, that it could be there are those who say Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid, when he said you shouldn't marry a girl with the same name as your mother, it's only not 2 generations, he meant only 3 consecutive generations. Okay, we'll hold it over here. Shkayach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.